Hello, my kiddos. It is Sunday night for me, Sunday morning for you, and we talked on Skype earlier. And the last time we read in the book, Merry and Pippin, we left Merry and Pippin as they were with a band of orcs, and they were surrounded by the riders of Rohan on three sides with their backs to the river, so they can't get away. And they're about to get into a battle with the riders of Rohan. But we know how that battle ends. What we don't know is what happened to Merry and Pippin. So let's find out. The night was cold and still. All round the knoll on which the orcs were gathered, little watchfires sprang up, golden red in the darkness, a complete ring of them. They were within a long bowshot, but the riders did not show themselves against the light, and the orcs wasted many arrows shooting at the fires until Ugluk stopped them. The riders made no sound. Later in the night, when the moon came out of the mist, then occasionally they could be seen, shadowy shapes that glinted now and again in the white light as they moved in ceaseless patrol. "They'll wait for the sun, curse them," growled one of the guards. "Why don't we get together and charge through? What's old Ugluk think he's doing? I should like to know." "I dare say you would," snarled Ugluk, stepping up from behind. "Meaning I don't think at all, eh? Curse you! You're as bad as the other rabble, the maggots and the apes of Luke Bruce. No good trying to charge with them. They just squeal and bolt, and there are more than enough of those filthy horseboys to mop up your lot on the flat. There's only one thing those maggots can do. They can see like gimlets in the dark, but these whiteskins have better night eyes than most men, for all I've heard. And don't forget their horses. They can see the night breeze, or so it's said. Still, there's one thing the fine fellows don't know. Mahur and his lads are in the forest, and they should turn up any time now." Ugluk's words were enough, apparently, to satisfy the Isengarders, but the other orcs were both dispirited and rebellious. They posted a few watchers, but most of them lay on the ground resting in the pleasant darkness. It did indeed become very dark again, for the moon passed westward into thick cloud, and Pippin could not see anything a few feet away. The fires brought no light to the hillock. The riders were not, however, content merely to wait for the dawn and let their enemies rest. A sudden outcry on the east side of the knoll showed that something was wrong. It seemed that some of the men had ridden in close, slipped off their horses, crawled to the edge of the camp and killed several orcs, and then had faded away again. Ugluk dashed off to stop a stampede. Pippin and Merry sat up. Their guards, Isengarders, had gone with Ugluk, but if the hobbits had any thought of escape, it was soon dashed. A long hairy arm took each of them by the neck and threw them close together. Dimly they were aware of Grishnach's great head and hideous face between them. His foul breath was on their cheeks. He began to paw them and feel them. Pippin shuddered as hard, cold fingers groped down his back. "Well, my little ones," said Grishnach in a soft whisper, "enjoying your nice rest, or not? A little awkward place, perhaps, swords and whips on one side, and nasty spears on the other. Little people should not meddle in affairs that are too big for them." His fingers continued to grope. There was a light like a pale but hot fire behind his eyes. The thought came suddenly into Pippin's mind, as it caught direct from the urgent thought of his enemy. "Grishnach knows about the ring. He's looking for it, while Ugluk is busy. He probably wants it for himself." Cold fear was in Pippin's heart, and yet at the same time he was wondering what he would make of Grishnach's desire. "I don't think you will find it that way," he whispered. "It isn't easy to find." "Find it," said Grishnach. His fingers stopped crawling, and gripped Pippin's shoulder.
Find what? What are you talking about, little one?
For a moment, Pippin was silent. Then suddenly in the darkness he made a noise in his throat.
Gollum, Gollum.
Nothing, my precious, he added. The hobbits felt Grishnach's fingers twitch.
Oh no,
hissed the goblin softly.
That's what he means, is it?
Oh, very, very dangerous, my little ones. Perhaps, said Merry, now alert and aware of Pippin's guess. Perhaps, and not only for us. Still, you know your own business best. Do you want it or not? And what would you give for it?
Do I want it? Do I want it?
Said Grishnach, as if puzzled, but his arms were trembling.
What would I give for it? What do you mean?
We mean, said Pippin, choosing his words carefully, that it's no good groping in the dark. We could save you time and trouble, but you must untie our legs first, or we'll do nothing and say nothing.
My dear, tender little fools, hissed Grishnach. Everything you have and everything you know will be got out of you in due time. Everything. You'll wish there was more that you could tell to satisfy the questioner. Indeed you will, quite soon. We shan't hurry the inquiry. Oh dear, no. What do you think you've been kept alive for? My dear little fellows, please believe me when I say that it was not out of kindness. That's not even one of Gluk's faults.
I find it quite easy to believe, said Merry, but you haven't got your pretty home yet. And it doesn't seem to be going your way, whatever happens. If we come to Isengard, it won't be the great Grishnach that benefits. Saruman will take all that he can find. If you want anything for yourself, now's the time to deal. Grishnach began to lose his temper. The name of Saruman seemed especially to enrage him. Time was passing and the disturbance was dying down. Ugluk or the Isengarders might return at any minute.
Have you got it, either of you? He snarled. Gollum, Gollum, said Pippin.
Untie our legs, said Merry. They felt the orc's arms trembling violently.
Curse you, you filthy little vermin, he hissed.
Untie your legs. I'll untie every string in your bodies.
Do you think I can't search you to the
bones?
Search you?
I'll cut you both to quivering shreds. I don't need the help of your legs to get you away, and have you all to myself. Suddenly he seized them. The strength in his long arms and shoulders was terrifying. He tucked them one under each armpit and crushed them fiercely to his sides. A great stifling hand was clapped over each of their mouths. Then he sprang forward, stooping low. Quickly and silently he went until he came to the edge of the knoll. There, choosing a gap between the watchers, he passed like an evil shadow out into the night, down the slope and away westward, towards the river that flowed out of the forest. In that direction, there was a wide open space with only one fire. After going a dozen yards, he halted, peering and listening. Nothing could be seen or heard. He crept slowly on, bent almost double. Then he squatted and listened again. Then he stood up, as if to risk a sudden dash. At that very moment, the dark form of a rider loomed up right in front of him. A horse snorted and reared. A man called out. Grishnach flung himself on the ground flat, dragging the hobbits under him. Then he drew his sword. No doubt he meant to kill his captives, rather than allow them to escape or to be rescued. But it was his undoing. The sword rang faintly and glinted a little in the light of the fire away to his left. An arrow came whistling out of the gloom. It was aimed with skill and guided by fate, and it pierced his right hand. He dropped the sword and shrieked. There was a quick beat of hoofs, and even as Grishnach leaped up and ran, he was ridden down and a spear passed through him. He gave a hideous shivering cry and lay still. The hobbits remained flat on the ground, as Grishnach had left them. Another horseman came riding swiftly to his comrade's aid. Whether because of some special keenness of sight or because of some other sense, The horse lifted and sprang lightly over them, but its rider did not see them, lying covered in their elven cloaks. Too crushed for the moment, and too afraid to move. At last, Mary stirred and whispered softly, "So far so good, but how are we avoid being spitted?" The answer came almost immediately. The cries of Grishnach had roused the orcs. From the yells and screeches that came from the knoll, the hobbits guessed that their disappearance had been discovered. Ugluk was probably knocking off a few more heads. Then suddenly the answering cries of orc voices came from the right, outside the circle of watchfires, from the direction of the forest and the mountains. Mauhur had apparently arrived and was attacking the besiegers. There was the sound of galloping horses. The riders were drawing in their ring closer around the knoll, risking the orc arrows so as to prevent any sortie, while a company rode off to deal with the newcomers. Suddenly, Merry and Pippin realized that without moving, they were now outside the circle. There was nothing between them and escape. "Now," said Merry, "if only we had our legs and hands free, we might get away. But I can't touch the knots, and I can't bite them." "No need to try," said Pippin. "I was going to tell you. I managed to free my hands. These loops are only left for show. You'd better have had a bit of lembas first." He slipped the cords off his wrists and fished out a packet. The cakes were broken, but good, still in their leaf wrappings. The hobbits each ate 2 or 3 pieces. Taste brought back to them the memory of fair faces and laughter and wholesome food and quiet days now far away. For a while they ate thoughtfully, sitting in the dark, heedless of the cries and sounds of battle nearby. Pippin was the first to come back to the present. "We must be off," he said. "Half a moment." Grishnach's sword was lying close at hand, but it was too heavy and clumsy for him to use, so he crawled forward, and finding the body of the goblin, he drew from its sheath a long, sharp knife. With this, he quickly cut their bonds. "Now for it," he said. "When we've warmed up a bit, perhaps we shall be able to stand again and walk, but in any case we had better start crawling." They crawled. The turf was deep and yielding, and that helped them, but it seemed a long, slow business. They gave the watchfire a wide berth, and wormed their way forward bit by bit until they came to the edge of the river, gurgling away in the black shadows under its steep banks. Then they looked back. The sounds had died away. Evidently, Mauhur and his lads had been killed or driven off. The riders had returned to their silent, ominous vigil. It would not last very much longer. Already the night was old. In the east, which had remained unclouded, the sky was beginning to grow pale. "We must get under cover," said Pippin, "or we shall be seen. It will not be any comfort to us if these riders discover that we are not orcs after we are dead." He got up and stamped his feet. "These cords are cut like wires, but my feet are getting warm again. I could stagger on now. What about you, Merry?" Merry got up. "Yes," he said, "I can manage it. Lembas does put heart into you. A more wholesome sort of feeling, too, than the heart of that orc draft. I wonder what it was made of. Better not to know, I expect. Let's get a drink of water to wash away the thought of it." "Not here. The banks are too steep," said Pippin. "Forward now." They turned and walked side by side, slowly along the line of the river. Behind them the light grew in the east. As they walked, they compared notes, talking lightly in hobbit fashion of the things that had happened since their capture. No listener would have guessed from their words that they had suffered cruelly and been in dire peril, going without hope towards torment and death, or that even now, as they knew well, they had little chance of ever finding friend or safety again. "You seem to have been doing well, Master Took," said Merry. You will get almost a chapter in old Bilbo's book if ever I get a chance to report to him. Good work, especially guessing that hairy villain's little game and playing up to him. But I wonder if anyone will ever pick up your trail and find that brooch. I should hate to lose mine, but I am afraid yours is gone for good." I shall have to brush up my toes if I am to get level with you. Indeed, Cousin Brandybuck is going in front now. This is where he comes in. I don't suppose you have much notion where we are, but I spent my time at Rivendell rather better. We are walking west along the Entwash. The butt end of the Misty Mountains is in front, and Fangorn Forest. Even as he spoke, the dark edge of the forest loomed up straight before them. Night seemed to have taken refuge under its great trees, creeping away from the coming dawn. "Lead on, Master Brandybuck," said Pippin, "or lead back. We have been warned against Fangorn, but one so knowing will not have forgotten that." "I have not," answered Merry, "but the forest seems better to me all the same than turning back into the middle of a battle." He led the way under the huge branches of the trees. Old beyond guessing they seemed. Great trailing beards of lichen hung from them, blowing and swaying in the breeze. Out of the shadows the hobbits peeped, gazing back down the slope, little furtive figures that in the dim light looked like elf children in the deeps of time, peering out of the wild wood in wonder at their first dawn. Far over the great river and the brown lands, leagues upon gray leagues away, the dawn came, red as a flame. Loud rang the hunting horns to greet it. The riders of Rohan sprang suddenly to life. Horn answered horn again. Merry and Pippin heard, clear in the cold air, the neighing of war horses and the sudden singing of many men. The sun's limb was lifted, an arc of fire above the margin of the world. Then with a great cry the riders charged from the east. The red light gleamed on mail and spear. The orcs yelled and shot all the arrows that remained to them. The hobbits saw several horsemen fall, but their line held on up the hill and over it, and wheeled round and charged again. Most of the raiders that were left alive then broke and fled, this way and that, pursued one by one to the death. But one band, holding together in a black wedge, drove forward resolutely in the direction of the forest. Straight up the slope they charged towards the watchers. Now they were drawing near, and it seemed certain that they would escape. They had already hewn down 3 riders that barred their way. "We have watched too long," said Merry. "There's Ugluk. I don't want to meet him again." The hobbits turned and fled deep into the shadows of the wood. So it was that they did not see the last stand, when Ugluk was overtaken and brought to bay at the very edge of Fangorn. There he was slain at last by Eomer, the 3rd Marshal of the Mark, who dismounted and fought him sword to sword. And over the wide fields the keen-eyed riders hunted down the few orcs that had escaped and still had strength to fly. Then, when they had laid their fallen comrades in a mound and had sung their praises, the riders made a great fire and scattered the ashes of their enemies. So ended the raid, and no news of it came ever back to Mordor or to Isengard, but the smoke and the burning rose high to heaven and was seen by many watchful eyes. And that is the end of chapter 3. I love you always and forever, no matter what.